Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today, I wanted to just take a minute and talk about a couple of the different add-ons that I use when I play World of Warcraft. So these are just like the really big ones that have like a really big impact on how I interact with the game, right? So I will do a future video where I talk about like all the settings that I use specifically and stuff like that for my UI, because that is going to be, I mean, that's a whole video in itself. So I don't want to go through and like talk about what do I use as far as ElvUI, what do I do as far as Plater, that kind of thing. But I will mention those add-ons as I talk about the ones that are really impactful on how I play the game, right? So I've got a list of about 8 different add-ons that I want to talk about. The first one is ElvUI, right? ElvUI, and I also use a little add-on, additional add-on, that's called Shadow and Light. So these are 2 separate add-ons, but Shadow and Light is built on top of ElvUI, right? So if you're in like a raid group, for example, maybe I can do it from here. No, I can't. So these target marker icons, if you ever watch any of my videos where I'm in a raid, you'll see that I have like a line right here that has these different target marker icons on it. That's Shadow and Light that does that. It's not part of default ElvUI. Then I also believe that this little armory mode is also part of Shadow and Light, and it's not part of default ElvUI. So for anybody out there, most people out there already know about ElvUI, right? It's really popular, but not a ton of people, I think, know about Shadow and Light, which I think is worth getting as well, right? So I will, like I said, talk about in a future video how I set up my ElvUI, like all my settings and everything. But for now, I just want to mention that I do use it. That's why all my stuff looks like my bars look like this, and I've got the stuff down here and that kind of thing. This is all ElvUI, right? It's just a user interface overhaul for World of Warcraft, and a lot of people like it, including me. So, okay, then the next thing I want to talk about, maybe it would be smart to do this first. I'll just go to my add-ons tab, and I'll scroll through this pretty slowly. The next one I wanted to talk about though was bigwigs right here. This is what I use for my boss timers and things, right? And with it, I also use little wigs. Little wigs is important for 5-man dungeons, right? Whereas bigwigs, it says, is for boss encounters. So in a raid usually, and then little wigs is the dungeon version of bigwigs basically. So if you're gonna, it's really an option between using deadly boss mods or using bigwigs. And I was using deadly boss mods for a really long time, but I swapped over to bigwigs, and I'm pretty happy with the change. DBM is not bad by any means, and a lot of people I think really like it, and I think it's good, right? But for me personally, I like the different amount of ways that you can change bigwigs. You can personalize it, right? And it felt way more straightforward to do so, right? So I like bigwigs personally. And like I said before, I can go... Actually, I guess because that's not part of my UI, I'll just type /BW, and it pops up bigwigs, right? So this is what bigwigs looks like. You can do different things. The main thing that I do, I don't touch any of this stuff really. You could like adjust how your countdown sounds. You could change when it starts talking. You can change the font for the text, that kind of thing. You can change this color, so when I'm in a raid boss, if somebody does a 10-second pull timer or something, there will be red numbers that start counting down at 5 so that I can know. There's a bunch of other things you can do in here. You can change spells. You can auto reply to people. I have this disabled, but you can have it reply to people when you're in a boss encounter. Stuff like that. You've got statistics and things, right? So you've got all these options you can change. I leave pretty much everything in here. In fact, I don't think I've ever touched anything in this section, but I have changed things in this raid bosses section. So you can go in and look at all of the different mechanics for every boss in Sanctum of Domination, or even older raids, right? All of the raids are in here. even world bosses, right? And then you can go through, you click on Sanctum of Domination, and then we've got the Terror Group pulled up. And then if there's a certain mechanic in here that I really want to make sure I know when it happens, right? Let's say this Chains of Eternity, for example. If I get this Chains of Eternity on me, I want my screen to flash. I want it to freak out at me so that there's no way that I don't know that it's on me, right? So what I do is you come in here, you click on, so you click on Sanctum of Domination, you go to this drop down and choose whatever boss you want, and then you click on these arrows by the name of the mechanic that you want to change how the add-on handles it, right? And then I click on this emphasize me only thing for things that are going to target me, like this chains thing. You could emphasize it so that anytime anyone gets it, it'll freak out at you and say, hey, watch out, chains are going out. So maybe a raid leader or somebody would want to do this. But I just have it so I don't need to know when other people get chains. So I just have it on me only, right? So if the chains are on me, it'll freak out. Otherwise, it'll just be like, it'll just play a sound and show an icon or whatever. But it won't make my whole screen flash blue or anything, right? So yeah, like what I like to do when a tier first comes out, I'll go through here and I'll look at every single boss. I took a page from Jeeth's book. He's a raider in Echo. What he does is when he goes into a new raid, he turns off everything in this add-on, right? So he goes through every single one, turns everything off, and then as he's doing the boss fights, he starts turning things on that he's doing the boss fight and he's like, oh, that guy just died to something that I really want to know about, right? And so he turns that one on. He has a minimalist approach, right? The less stuff you can have beeping and blaring in your face, right, the better, because you won't be as used to a bunch of stuff flashing in your face, right? And when stuff does flash in your face or freak out, you'll actually pay attention to it. If every single mechanic in here just plays an air horn every time it goes off, then anytime I hear an air horn, I'm not going to think, oh, I have to do dragging chains, but I might think, oh, do I have to do Deathlink now, or do I have to do Titanic Death Gaze, or do I have to do the Shared Suffering, or what, right? So that's a tip that I would give, is go through and personalize these things. It'll help your performance, right? Okay, so that's big wigs and little wigs. Little wigs is the exact same. I think you could do /LW. No, it looks like you can't. Maybe here in interface, add-ons. No, so I think little wigs is just built on top of big wigs. So if you do /BW and then go to dungeon bosses, this is little wigs, right? So you can click on, the different dungeons. Let's say in Mists of Tyranna Scythe, I want to know every time Tears of the Forest is going to go out, I want this to be emphasized so that I know to watch my feet, that kind of thing, right? So I would suggest you go in, if you do get these two add-ons, go in and check those out, set up your different options, and personalize it to how you like it. Okay, next we've got details, which is my DPS meter and my HPS meter over here. Details is really nice, and it's part of my UI, so I will save like all my settings and stuff for that future video. So be sure to subscribe if you want to see that in the future, right? But details is super nice, especially for checking like let's say I want to look at how much damage a certain ability did when we did this Painsmith Raznal kill, right? So I did 6.7k DPS on a heroic Painsmith, and I'm like, wow, that was pretty good. So why was it so good, right? How much damage were my melees from my Mindbender doing? Oh, 9.3% of my overall damage. That lets me know that Mindbender is pretty important, and things that buff Mindbender are also pretty good. My Shadowflame Rift, I got 25 hits out of it, and on average they did 4.5k damage, right? So this kind of thing is also really nice. You can even look at other people, right? So this Boomkin right here, who did the second most, most of his damage, right, is Star Surge and Wrath. And I can look through and say, oh, how often, if you click on this Auras tab, you can say, how long did he have Chaos Bane running, right? Or Soul Fragments from his Unholy set, right? You can go through and look at uptimes and things. So this is a really helpful one, especially if you're trying to like work on different builds, or you're gonna try and figure out what's strong and what's not strong. A lot of like content creators, when they go on the PTR and they're trying to figure out the new meta for the upcoming patch or whatever, they'll play a bunch of different builds and they'll have something like details running so that they can be like, okay, on that last poll, Kalamazi does this a lot. He'll be like, on that last poll, let's see, I click on, whatever boss we just did, Kel'Thuzad, for example, and I'll click on it and I'll be like, okay, well, I had Benevolent Fairy, Fey Guardians, and Guardian Fairy. So my Fey Guardians had about a 25% uptime on this boss. So I'm like, that's pretty good. I had the Field of Blossoms buff from Dreamweaver for about 19% of the boss. So you can go through, and look and see, is this new talent that only procs, however often, is that actually good or is it not as good, right? So I would suggest details for sure. There are other ones out there like Skada and Recount are two different damage meters that you could get, but I really like details. It's been very, very helpful. And on top of that, this box down here that's kind of hard to see. Let's see if I can get it in a better area. Maybe up here. This box, if you have watched any of my videos, you should be familiar with this box. It shows anytime I hit something, right? Anytime I cast an ability, it says what I cast and what I cast it on, right? So I'm channeling Mind Flay, it says that. I cast a Shadow Word Death on this guy, and it'll list everything. So that's, I'll cover this more in my new UI video, right? But this is super helpful. And even if I wasn't ever making YouTube videos or anything where, because I mostly have this for other people to see, but there are times where I do check this while I'm in the middle of the fight. So I can be like, wait, what did I just cast? And this will tell me, the last 6 or 7 things that I just cast, right? So highly recommend details. It's very, very nice, and can also help you get better at the game, right? Okay, so the next one I'll talk about is Plater. This is part of my UI, so again, I won't go too much into the details, but Plater is what I use for these nameplates, right? So this box right here, this black box, this is ElvUI, but this yellow box above this Ardent Moth right here, that's Plater, right? And Plater is very, very customizable, like to the point where I don't know what most of the settings do, right? Because it's so customizable. But one thing I do know is that it lets you change the colors of things, and that's very, very important to me because I'm colorblind, right? So I've got red-green color blindness, which means that when you've got your default red nameplates, it's hard for me to tell when something is pulled, when I have aggro on something, that kind of thing. If it's going to be aggressive to me, like this blue guy, I have it set where blue means they're aggressive and yellow means they're passive. These are very different colors, so it's very easy for me to tell, right? And then anytime I get in combat with something, it turns dark blue when it's attacking me, and aggressive things that aren't in combat with me when I'm in combat are now red, right? So that could be like, okay, I need to avoid this guy as well. And then as soon as this dies, this should go back to blue. It does, and that's Plater basically, right? So Plater is very, very nice. It also has some really good like debuff and buff tracking things. So you can see it's got all these different debuffs that are popping up on this guy, so I know that my Unholy Shard is working and my Dreamweaver buff is working, and it's got both of my dots on it. And when I hit it with a Death and Madness, oh, unfortunately it died. When I hit this guy with a Death and Madness, I can tell how much longer I have to kill this guy before I don't get my Insanity back. Like now, I'm not going to get the Death and Madness Insanity when this guy dies, right? Now I know that it's more than my Blood Shard is working, right? That kind of thing. So, Plater, very, very, very helpful. Maybe my favorite add-on in the game. It's super, super nice. Actually, it's probably my second favorite add-on in the game behind WeakAuras, because those are just nuts. So I would recommend, especially if you have any issues with colors and having a hard time telling that kind of thing, Plater is a super huge boon. I really, really like it. Okay, and then moving on, we'll talk about WeakAuras a little bit. This is another one where most people should know what these are, right? Because these are very, very, very impactful on the game. For anyone who doesn't know, WeakAuras, the add-on, it is this, right? It's basically an add-on where you can set up custom Lua code to run while you're playing the game to give you more information about the game. So like we've got this combat timer, right? So this will pop up. It does this custom function that somebody wrote. I didn't write this, but you can write these, right? You can write custom Lua code that updates every frame, that kind of thing. And what this will do is when I'm in combat, we'll have to close this, but if you watch down here, when I'm in combat with something, it starts a timer, right? So this timer is not part of the base game. This is a WeakAura. And then as I'm fighting things, all of this is a WeakAura as well. This insanity bar, all of those different cooldowns I have that pop up right here. I made this one. It's just a bunch of different icons that tell me the cooldowns on things. And WeakAuras is super, super helpful. And if you're in a really high, I could delete this one because we're not gonna have Dancing Fever ever again. If you're in a good guild, most mythic guilds will be like, hey guys, going into this next boss, make sure everybody has this WeakAura, right? So it's pretty much essential. Not 100% essential, because I have been in guilds where there are people who use no add-ons and they're mythic raiders, right? So it's not like you absolutely have to have these add-ons to be a mythic raider or whatever. But they do help tremendously, especially on boss fights where there are mechanics that aren't very straightforward that randomly assign people to do things. You can get a WeakAura that automatically takes care of managing those people, right? So, for example, Fate Scribe, we had a WeakAura where, and we still have it, where, and maybe I can find it in here actually. Let's see. We have a WeakAura for Fate Scribe where if you get the Runic Affinity, this thing, it has a list. So it'll, on Heroic, and I think on Mythic as well, but maybe not. On Heroic, 10 people get the debuff to be able to do the runes on Fate Scribe, and this automatically assigns 6 of them to a different marker, and then the other 4 are set as backups, right? So when I'm doing Fate Scribe, if the Runic Affinity goes on me, this will tell me I either need to go to Star, I either need to go to Diamond, or I'm a backup, or whatever, right? And this is a WeakAura that somebody else wrote that I just downloaded and imported, and now it makes my life a million times easier, right? So if you don't have WeakAuras, I would recommend it 1,000,000,000%. It's like so helpful. Even for stuff that's not super impactful, like boss mechanic stuff, like this stuff down here that shows my character stats, my 14% crit, my 27% haste, all that. This is a WeakAura as well. So you can have it for, it doesn't have to be some crazy custom Lua code thing. You can have it just be like an icon that tracks things. And WeakAuras, when you try to make a new WeakAura, you can go through and there are a bunch of settings in here that are pretty straightforward and intuitive, so you can make your own. So you don't have to rely on other people to make all your WeakAuras, but you can if that's what you choose, right? Okay, so next, add-ons number 6. There's 2 here, but they're very similar. You've got method raid tools, which used to be exorcist raid tools. So if you ever hear somebody talking about ERT or MRT, that's what this is. And then we've also got RC Loot Council. So for pretty much any high-end guild, like I was saying, RC Loot Council is a must-have. And ERT, or MRT now, is also a pretty much a must-have, right? So what RC Loot Council does is when you're in a raid, somebody is assigned as the Loot Council leader, basically. And what you do is, it's usually the officers and the raid leader. When a piece of loot drops for your raid, it drops to a certain person. And if the person can trade the loot, then a box will pop up for every raider in the raid, and who is eligible for that loot, right? So if a mail piece drops, it won't pop up for me. But if a cloth piece drops, it'll pop up for me because I'm a priest, right? And it'll give you some options that are customizable. That'll say like major upgrade, minor upgrade, Mythic Plus, transmog. These are all things that I've seen on the loot windows. And then what you can do is you can be like, you can look at the item, you can compare it to what you're wearing, right? Let's say there's a sweet ring. I can be like, oh, that ring's got haste mastery on it. Let's see my ring. Okay, this ring's pretty good, but this one's 252 item level. So this, I would call that a major upgrade. And then I click major. And then it sends all the info from all those raiders and how they vote on the loot to the council, the loot council, right? Which is usually, like I said, your raid leader and your officers. And then they all vote on it. So if two people both say that it's a major upgrade, then what the add-on will do is it'll roll the dice for those two people. And it'll show up a dice roll for each of them. And then your officers and your raid leader, whoever's in the loot council, has the opportunity to vote on the different loot and decide where it's going to end up going, right? And then it'll send a message to the person who got the loot, and it'll tell them where to trade it to, that kind of thing. So that's RC Loot Council. And then Method Raid Tools now is another one that is like super, super helpful. It's got a bunch of different raid tools. Surprising, right? So you can have notes in here. A lot of WeakAuras will have will work on ERT notes or MRT notes. So like the one I was showing you before that has the Fate Scribe Runic Affinity thing uses an ERT note, and this is ours. So the people near the top will be assigned first, and the people near the bottom will be assigned closer for they'll be assigned to the outside rune rings more, and the people near the top will be assigned to the inside rune rings. But yeah, so you've got notes that you can set up, you've got personal notes you can set up. You can push notes to your raid with this. So if you click this send button, our raid leader will type all this out and hit send. And then if I type /ERT space note, it'll pop up in this corner right here. I have this adjusted, and that's something I'll talk about more in my UI video. But I don't have to type all this out, right? I don't have to copy and paste it in there, because the raid leader can just hit the send button. He can type it out, hit send, and it comes over to everybody, right? Which is super nice. And then you've got a bunch of other stuff. You can track raid cooldowns if you're a raid leader or whatever. So you can be like, I want to know when Avenging Crusader is up. So you click on this check mark, that kind of thing. You can like draw visual notes. This is something that people rarely use as far as I've seen. You've got fight logs. You've got your raid inspection thing. So if you're in a raid, this will tell you talents. This will tell you all the gear people are wearing. You got timers. You can track the battle reses. You can get statistics on bosses. Like these are our statistics right here. For instance, I pulled Sire Denathrius 116 times, and I killed him 6 times. So that's sad, but that's life on a hard boss, right? Contrary-wise, I pulled Stone Legion Generals 323 times and only killed it 11 times, right? So anyway, yeah, that's Method Raid Tools and RC Loot Council. Next, I'll quickly talk about Mythic Dungeon Tools and Raider.io. Anyone who has done Mythic Dungeons before Blizzard came out with this Mythic Plus rating, you should be familiar with Raider.io, right? So Raider.io is a website where you can go and you can check, you can compare, it's a leaderboard, right? So you can compare how well you've done in Mythic Plus to other people and how well they've done in Mythic Plus, right? And it gives you a score. It's basically exactly this Mythic Plus rating, but it was fan-made well before this ever came out, right? And I still use the add-on because when you hover over somebody's name, like me, keep your eye over here. I thought I almost kept it up there. Yeah, so over here you'll see when I hover over my name, it pops up and it tells me my current Mythic Plus score, and this works for any player that I hover over. It tells me their Mythic Plus score. It tells me their best run this season. Mine's a 17, the other side. It tells me my Raider.io score from last season. And then it tells me my raid progress as well. I'm 5 out of 10 Mythic. I'm 10 out of 10 Heroic, right? And so you can use this kind of thing. It's a little bit not as necessary now because of this Mythic Plus rating, right? But you can use this to see how is this person doing, how should I invite this person to my key? Do they have a high score? Are they really well progressed in the raid? How did they do last season? All that kind of stuff, right? So that's Raider.io. And then the Mythic Dungeon Tools, I should say, is this thing. And anyone who's done Mythic Plus semi-seriously should know all about this. This has every single mob and every single dungeon on a map, and you can click on different groups, and you can, you know, set up different polls, and it'll tell you what percentage it gives you. It'll tell you, you can draw on it, so you can say, we're going to come down this way, then we're going to go up here, and we're going to go around, and then we're going to kill this guy and go in here, and then once we're in here, we're going to pull this and this on top of this over here, right? That kind of thing. And you can do all sorts of different things with these, right? You can draw lines, right? You can draw arrows, all sorts of different things. And mostly what people use this for is to choose different groups and be like, okay, in this next dungeon, we want to pull all of this together, or we want to pull this, and we want to pull this, and then, you know, etc., etc., right? So if you're unfamiliar with Mythic Dungeon tools, that's what it is, basically. You can also click on mobs, and it'll tell you what they do. So this is a Depraved Darkblade from Halls of Atonement. It does the Deadly Thrust. It tells you how much health it has on a +10 fortified. It even gives you the NPC ID, right? It tells you different ways you can CC it, right? So you can taunt it, you could polymorph it, you can disorient it, you can stun it, all these different things. So it's got a bunch of sweet different things that you can use. Basically anything you want to know about Mythic Plus dungeons, you can find in Mythic Dungeon tools. Very similar to Method Raid tools, right? So that's those. And then the last one I want to talk about is Simulation Craft. So for anyone who does sims on their character, if you don't know about this, let me teach you. There's a website, there are several websites out there where you can simulate how your character will perform with different gear. Let me get rid of this ERT note real quick. So for example, let's say I want to know if this sin-stained pendant that's 229 is better than the one that I'm currently wearing, the Periapt of Pristine Preservation, which is 239, right? And I want to have a number that I can be like, it's this much better, right? On average, it'll do this much more damage or this much less damage, that kind of thing, right? So what I use is the website raidbots.com. And what I do is if you install this Simulation Craft add-on, all you have to do is you just click on this button, right? It'll show you your SimC input. So I just hit Control-C, I hit OK. So now it's copied to my clipboard. I go to the website, I input it, and then I can choose all the different options on there to tell me, you know, what kind of different gear is better, what's worse, what gems I should be using, that kind of thing. And also, if you're not using a website to do it, they do have a standalone application that you can use on your desktop, and you can use this input for that as well, right? It's just that the websites have been made to make that process easier because it's not very intuitive and straightforward, right? So again, I would recommend this one a lot. These first 8 or so that I've mentioned, I would not play this game nearly as well, or maybe at all, if I didn't have some or all of these, right? Because they're that impactful to the game, and they honestly have made me a better player, right? Okay, so that's all the add-ons that I wanted to talk about today. I do have other ones, a couple little small ones in this add-on list. I'll scroll through it again as I do this this outro or whatever. So that's going to be it for today's video. Like I said before, there's going to be a future video where I go through and talk about the specific settings I use for different things, mainly for my UI, right? So if you want to see that video in the future, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, maybe join my Discord where you'll get a notification anytime I post a new video. Or you can even follow me on Twitch and come ask me questions there, right? And I can talk to you about this kind of stuff live. Other than that, that's going to be it for me. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!